Joining us now, one of the former officials who signed that letter, former Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary for Threat Prevention and Security Policy in the Trump administration, Elizabeth Neumann. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
Tell me who Trump is.
Dangerous, unfit to serve. And I think he is desires to be an authoritarian. Certainly that is who he admires on the world stage, is other authoritarians. He is leading this country, a certain segment of this country, to a very, very dark place. And that's why it's important for myself and for people like John Kelly and others to try to issue this warning. You need to take what he says seriously. When he says he wants to be a dictator on day one, he actually means that. He kind of says it in a joking way. He says it in a way that allows people to give him a pass. Do not give him a pass. And closed doors, his worst instincts would frighten the average American. He has no humanity, no decency, no respect for just the fact that a human being made in the image of God deserves at least a modicum of respect, and instead is just willing to toss people aside to achieve his aims. He is very dangerous indeed.
Why do you think people like him so much, given what you're warning, what John Kelly is warning? Is there something you believe they're not hearing?
Clearly, people are not hearing it. I have heard some commentary that, hey, folks are more concerned about their grocery bills and about, how their kids are doing in school. And I'm a mom. I worry about my grocery budget, too. I worry about my kids. I totally get that. I think maybe we're not helping the American people understand that the reason that we have the luxury to worry about our kids and our grocery bills is because we have freedom. And that freedom is not guaranteed. It's something that every election, we have a responsibility as citizens to make sure that we steward that well, that we maintain that freedom, so that we can worry about those other things that are inherently so important, our kids, and being able to serve in our communities and do well in life, right? Like that is such a blessing, but it is a blessing that comes from freedom. And when you have somebody like Donald Trump, he is posing a threat to that freedom. He is posing a threat to the way of life, and maybe that's why we're not connecting it to people in a way that helps them understand what is truly at risk here. Our American way of life, that freedom that we have always enjoyed, at least in our lifetimes, that is actually what we're voting on this election cycle. From a policy perspective, I would love to get back to fighting over policies and debating about the right ways to handle various challenges that we have in this country. But this election, it's not about that. It's about whether we put somebody in office who has the character and the competence to take that oath of office, or we put somebody back in who has actually said he doesn't care about the Constitution. He doesn't care about upholding the rule of law. They are just constraints to him that he is more than happy to shrug off, kick off, and very delighted, in fact, to mete out the worst instincts that we have seen in history when we put people with those authoritarian tendencies into positions of power. It leads to violence, it leads to destruction, and certainly leads to a loss of freedom.
Elizabeth, you were in charge of threat prevention at DHS, and you seem pretty worried. Is there something specific, something that he might do that you are worried about if he is reelected?
We know from some of the both writings, interviews of some of the people that are likely to be in his cabinet and in his administration, that there are plans to, for example, round up immigrants and deport them. Having watched this administration up close and personal about how they tried to execute any number of things related to immigration, I will tell you that those plans will not have been well thought out. Operationally, they will be haphazard. We're likely to end up with situations where the National Guard is called out to round up people. I think we're going to end up in forms of constitutional crisis where you have blue state governors opposing the use of the National Guard in that way. The Insurrection Act probably implemented so that the National Guard can follow the president's orders. And you're going to end up with, if you think about who the National Guard is, I mean, these are your neighbors and your colleagues. They support the National Guard usually because they're interested in helping out in a major disaster, or occasionally they go overseas and serve during wartime. We're not used in this country to having the National Guard get called out to do police functions. And that's basically what they have telegraphed they plan to do in order to do this mass roundup of what they consider to be illegal immigrants. I think that would lead to quite a bit of conflict and violence in the streets, not the least of which will be any number of untold disasters, immigrants that aren't actually illegal being deported, and the humanitarian situation that would be likely to unfurl there when you're rounding up a mass number of people and it hasn't been properly planned for. It's likely to be quite catastrophic for those individuals that get caught up in it. So that's just one example where we know that it's not Trump. And that's the thing that I think most people forget. Like, Trump actually doesn't care too much about the policy, but there are quite a few ideologues around him that do, and they have their plans ready, and they know that Donald Trump will let them use and abuse government power to implement their plans. And that's where I think we're likely to see some pretty dark incidents in our country.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the documentary that was just made about Jacob Soboroff's book about the separation of migrant families, and the head of ICE and the way he talks about it and what he says he wants to do if Donald Trump gets elected again and he's put back in charge. It's worth watching that documentary, definitely. Elizabeth Neumann, thank you very much. Appreciate it.